Ardy Arianpour arrived in San Diego as a 6-year-old immigrant from the Middle East, and he didn't waste any time getting going. By 16, he was working at the Salk Institute, and after college pursued a series of sales and marketing roles, even finding time to get involved in a landmark gene patent lawsuit at the U.S. Supreme Court. As co-founder and CEO of Seqster, he's bringing patient-centric interoperability to the masses. Seqster has the wind at its back, and with the 21st Century Cures Act, Ardy contends that Seqster essentially is the law. In this episode of the Health Biz podcast, Ardy explains what it means to be a data artist, what it means to be patient-centric when your customers are not the patients, and why Seqster is different from everything else out there. He also digs into the reasons behind Takeda's investment in the company and the recent partnerships with Medable and Datavant. I'm your host, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. We help companies throughout healthcare and life sciences make informed strategic decisions, and interoperability is a frequent topic. If your company needs strategy consulting support, please contact me at dwilliams@healthbusinessgroup.com. Ardy Arianpour, CEO and co-founder of Seqster, welcome to the Health Biz podcast.
David, it's a pleasure to be here. Happy Tuesday. Happy Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, it is taco time. We'll see about that. Well, you're in San Diego. There's real tacos there, so maybe I'll wait till I get out there before I try one from Boston. So listen, we're gonna talk about your seeking and all that, but let's talk about your background, including winding it way back. And I want to hear about your childhood. Where'd you grow up? What were your childhood influences?
Yeah, absolutely. I was so fortunate to land in the United States at the age of 6.5 in 1986. I was actually born in the Iran-Iraq War. And basically, I had that family immigrant story of our family escaped the Middle East during the war. And we came as far west as we could. And that was San Diego, California.
Nice.
Not New York City, I guess you could say, or Boston.
No.
So we decided to come all the way out west and all the way out south, as close as to the Mexico border as you can get. And most people didn't know San Diego at the time. And I grew up in a small town called Scripps Ranch. And if it wasn't for Scripps Ranch in San Diego, I don't think Seqster would exist, because my career really started from just networking with the neighbors who were aligned and connected to research and biotech at the time.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like age 6 was probably a good time to come over because of the way that war went. You were probably a year or two from being sent to the front. So it's a good one to skip. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and at that time, I was there when the Vietnam War ended. And so that all of a sudden you'd have somebody that was, one kid, and they had all of a sudden 15 people living in their house. And then also, during the Iranian Revolution around 1979, a bunch of people came over at that time as well. So it was enriching for me as an American, who was there to meet these people coming from these other places. Now, some of them were fairly traumatized. Some of them were fairly shielded as well. But that's interesting to hear about the kind of the starting point. And not when you were 6, but I think when you were 16, you're all of a sudden going and working with Jonas Salk.
Yeah. So when I was 16, I landed my first job at the Salk Institute, and I had the opportunity. My neighbor actually was a engineer for DNA synthesizers. And I had another neighbor that was really in line with, let's say, finances. And I was trying to figure out, to be honest with you, what I want to do with my life. I was always fascinated with science, but I had a natural knack for business. And so, as I was cleaning cars, washing, my folks' cars in the driveway,
Yeah.
I would have conversations with the neighbors. And that's how I landed my job actually at the Salk Institute, where I learned what my neighbors' jobs were. And they were, 50 years old at the time when I was 16. But I got hooked up with the Salk Institute, and I realized really quickly that, you can make some impact on medicine through research. And that helped me open up my perspective in, pursuing my undergraduate degree at UC Irvine in biological sciences and being pre-med. And then from there, it was, I pivoted really quickly. I wasn't smart enough. My ADHD got in the way of,
Yeah.
getting into medical school. And I think just being just so extroverted, I needed to figure out like something else. And naturally, sales and marketing fit. So I landed my first job when I was 22 at Dubin Medical, selling injectable drugs to the marketplace. And since the age of 22, never had a resume. I'm 41 now, and I landed multiple different jobs, and in my mid 20s became a biotech executive, and did an MBA that took me 4 years because I had just a great career going for me. But really, just worked my way up through the streets and conferences, and combining technology, science, and business together, and just really being passionate about making impact at scale for patient lives.
No, it sounds like a good journey. I saw in San Diego, probably you were there at a good time when there was no drought, so you could actually go out and wash your car and talk to your neighbors. I had my next door neighbor in Washington D.C. worked for the CIA, so I didn't get a summer job with him. Or if I did, I can't be explicit about it. But a couple doors down, there was a guy who's actually a physician and a researcher at a VA hospital, and I had a summer job there, actually working on computers. So it sounds like a good path and a good reason to get out there and talk to the neighbors.
Yeah, and a big influence for me was also my mom got hit with breast cancer when I was 18,
Yeah.
right when I was starting undergrad. And I had about 2 years of work experience at the Salk Institute. And I was working with a bunch of postdocs on the BRCA1 and 2 genes. And it just happened to be coincidence that, I learned at an early age a little bit about genetics and breast cancer genes. And then my mom got hit with breast cancer. And then from there, that had a lot of influence, I think, in pursuing personal health. And really, Seqster has a story that hits back from 1998, really.
Yeah. Now, when you talk about, the sort of the genetic side of it, not only that, not only do you go and chat with your neighbors washing the cars, I think you also went and told the Supreme Court about what they should do about gene patents too. Or am I exaggerating that one a little bit?
Yeah, no, when I was 29, that was when I landed my first startup. So I worked in, corporate America, I guess you could say, big companies in my 20s, and started in, life science, started in the injectable pharmaceutical, market, and then pivoted to life science research, qPCR and cloning, and learned a little bit about that, and then got involved into international business development with Eurogentech. And then from there, got recruited to a company called Cogenics that became part of clinical data and then sold to Forest Labs. And then I was like a Beckman employee for like 2 weeks. And then I got recruited to this company called Ambry Genetics, and it was a really small company. I was employee number 19. And, that was the game changing, I think, moment, because I had the opportunity of building my own genomics services division from scratch. So the startup allowed me to build a startup within the startup. We started generating, millions of dollars in revenue, and then really pushing the envelope in bringing next gen sequencing technologies, which San Diego was leading and pioneering the efforts in next gen sequencing from Illumina technology. And having been around that for my early 20s, knew a lot, I guess, to be dangerous, and was at the forefront of being part of the SCOTUS decision in 2013, which created Ambry Genetics, one of our last companies that I worked for as senior vice president there, into a $1 billion exit to Konica Minolta and the Sovereign Fund of Japan. So that was great because we just got to learn a lot about the engineering side, clinical diagnostic side, and more importantly, the data side. But we were on the dark side, and all the data was being siloed. And, I thought there had to be something bigger than just being part of a lab. And all these folks were coming out with new laboratory diagnostic tests. Consumer genomics was taking off from the 23andMe's and Ancestry Inc.coms of the world, and I got my feet wet as the chief strategy officer after that at a company called Pathway, and learned a little bit about working with Watson and AI.
How was your Jeopardy game?
Yeah,
How's your
actually,
Jeopardy?
it's so funny. I mean, I think the IBM Watson stuff is, it's great for the Jeopardy stuff.
Yeah.
It hasn't been so proven for science, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
it's sort of like the guy, hits his stride like it is like a big star in 11th grade. And you think this guy's going places, and it turns out that was the peak of it right there at Jeopardy.
that was the best branding, actually. To be able to take that type
Oh
of
yeah,
branding, and everyone, still talks about that. If they were able to take it and impact patient lives at scale, I think they would have become the Amazon or Apple of health, I guess you could say.
yeah,
But I think IBM missed that boat,
they did.
unfortunately. And the reason being is because they weren't thinking about patients.
Yeah,
And I think we're living in this post-pandemic era now. Seqster founded it in 2016, and it was all about putting the person at the center of healthcare to disrupt all of the episodic EMR data, baseline genetic data, combine your sensor, wearable medical device data. And in 2021, I'm so proud to speak on behalf of our team, who has executed just the innovation that our country in the US here has spent billions of dollars, on trying to crack this interoperability problem. They haven't been able to. And we've done it from a patient-centric, real-world data in real-time platform that is just, spectacular.
So when you started up Seqster, was it sort of like obvious to you that like this company is needed and here's how we're going to go after it, or did you sort of wander into it from the founding and it ended up being something totally different?
Yeah, so it was kind of an accident. The going after interoperability was an accident, but I always had the vision from day one to this morning on our stand-up call that keep the patient at the center of healthcare. We have never strayed away from that. And the laser focus of Seqster has been patient centricity. The problem has been companies, enterprises, were not really thinking about this, I could say, till about a year ago.
Yeah,
And in 2016, no one wanted to talk to us. In 2017, I was able to raise some good amounts of seed funds. 2018, I get a call from Bill Gates, who wants to meet. Actually, I met Bill Gates in Boston face to face for about 3 hours
yeah,
and demo our platform. And he was the first person, actually, to tell me that you got to take this enterprise, because we had it built completely for the consumer. But
yeah.
you have to raise, hundreds of millions of dollars for marketing to get consumer attention.
Hmm.
And folks don't really care about their health until they're sick, unless you care about your loved one's health as a caregiver. So we've learned a lot about the patient journey. And we have a handful of phenomenal pharma companies that have licensed our platform. And this is where we are making impact at patient lives at scale with some clear use cases for decision support software.
So you talk about this sort of person-centric interoperability, and can you say, where is the usual centrality or centricity of when you think about interoperability? I mean, who is it focused on? Is it focused on the hospital, the physician, Watson? Like, who's it normally focused on, and what does it mean to shift it to being person-centric?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that the person, the patient, has to be in complete control, ownership, and collection of their health data.
Yeah,
There's no one better that can create a longitudinal health record than yourself. And there's just never been technology to enable you to do that. We've had these things in the fintech world for finance, and such as Plaid or Mint or Personal Capital, where you can bring all your finance information together. So we've never had a technology and platform where you can do that for healthcare. Now, healthcare data is messy, it is dirty, it is complicated, And if you want to connect all the providers in the U.S., there's certain challenges. If you want to connect all the clinics, there's certain challenges. If you want to connect all of the labs, there's certain challenges. And every day there's some new wearable coming out or some sort of sensor. And then you have the claims data and you have social determinants of health data. So how do you put all this data that I'm talking about on one page in one graph so that the patients themselves can be empowered to share their data? At the same time, they can consent to empower enterprises and pharma companies and life science companies to make medicine faster or to come out with certain vaccines quicker or whatever the problems that we have to solve in our world. But I think we have tackled the hardest challenge in healthcare. And that's what's so exciting. That's why our team is so passionate about what we're doing, because we couldn't have picked a bigger problem to go after.
No kidding. So, I understand that it's sort of an idealistic approach, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe, especially in healthcare, somebody as a data artist. What the heck is that?
Yeah, you have to be an artist. You have to be able to, an artist starts with a blank canvas, right? And doesn't really know what the end product's going to look like, right? You
Yeah.
just keep painting and you just keep painting. Even if you're looking out into the ocean, the sunset and the colors are changing by, milliseconds. And so your painting is changing in real time. Your data is no different. And as we get older, unfortunately, we get hit with certain diseases and certain things come out either based on our genetics or based on environments or based on other factors that we just don't know. And, with Seqster, I think it allows, the visualization of health data. And this is something, it's not just about aggregation. We're not a data aggregator. That's only one piece of it. We're not just, fire APIs. That's just one small piece of it. We're a comprehensive solution for the enterprise that gets fully embedded into the enterprise data backbone and allows collection of data and the empowerment of data at scale. That's what's key.
Now, interoperability has always been something, and I say always, from about 2009 or so, the High Tech Act, and it was always talked about. And yet there hasn't been a lot of interoperability, even though there's been a lot of wiring up of the country. Now, some of that's sort of technical reasons, and some of it is just sort of business reasons that people want to sort of, information hugging, hold on to the data rather than give it out. Where are we today, and how do some of the things that are going on, like the information blocking rule, is that good for you? Is that bad for you? How do you think of yourself in that thicket?
Yeah, so we were on the front lines working with, ONC and HHS with Don Rucker and Seema Verma over 2 years ago regarding the CMS ONC Interoperability 21st Century's Cures Act. What we didn't know, it was on March 9th last year,
Right.
right before HIMSS got canceled, those rules dropped. Now, they got delayed because of COVID in 2020, and they're going into full effect in July for providers and payers, just in a month, where they'll have to be paying penalties. And I think that segment is scrambling to look for certain solutions. What we didn't know in 2016, David, when we founded Seqster, was the fact that Seqster was going to become law. So it's
Right.
great that these laws are passing, but if there's no technology that is enabling the patient to connect to various different providers and data sources and wearables and genetic labs and so forth, who cares if the law passed?
Yeah.
And so, I think we're sitting at the intersection of healthcare and technology, and it's at a tipping point. And you're seeing a ton of activity now in various different segments, not just in healthcare, but you're seeing it in the clinical trial space. You're seeing it in the telemedicine space. You're seeing it in the care delivery space and insurance space, even, real-time underwriting. So I think all of this is coming together very nicely, and we couldn't be happier that we have a solution at scale for any enterprise that's interested in this.
We're so used to bipartisan bickering or deadlocks in Congress and so on. It seems like health information technology is like kind of a bipartisan issue, if there ever was one. What you're, at least in recent years, you're describing working with the prior administration, and now ONC, now it's being run by a friend of mine, Mickey Tripathi, who will be a guest on this podcast in the coming months. As far as I understand, they're not unraveling what was already done, but more of a continuation. How do you compare the previous administration to this one, or what's the transition been like?
Yeah, I think, look, Mickey is phenomenal, and I've had a couple discussions with Mickey, and he's definitely the right person to take over. And everyone, I think, was happy that Mickey got elected to take on this, because I think he understands interoperability. At the same time, it doesn't matter which administration, to be honest with you. It's so funny. We're on this podcast. I'm wearing a blue shirt. You're wearing a red shirt, just out of
Yeah,
coincidence here. Not, it doesn't matter, what
I
side
thought we
you're
were on the
on.
same team. Yeah, you're right. Maybe we're on the opposite.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It just depends. On taxes, I'm on one other team. On other, various different comments, I'm on some other team. So I don't think I'm on any team. I'm more like Switzerland. But
Yeah,
more importantly, I think Mickey's gonna have the same challenges as the last administration. And I think if Mickey can concentrate on finding the right tech that can really transform this digital transformation faster, because time kills all deals, I always say.
yeah,
And unfortunately, time kills patients if you don't have the right data too. I've seen this firsthand. Our team has seen this firsthand. And we're hopeful that things will be accelerated. However, this government moves very slow. These various different bodies have bureaucracy in their place, and there's a lot of red tape. So it doesn't matter if it was the last administration or the next administration. I still think that they still move at the same pace, unless they make a drastic change. There has to be bloodshed
yeah.
in a revolution. And if you don't make bloodshed, then there's going to be no revolution. So if you're going to do the same thing as the last, administration, you're going to get the exact same results.
So you answered one of my kind of overarching questions, which is, how are you a person-centric interoperability company when your consumers, where your customers, those paying the bill, are generally not the patients? Now, that's a healthcare thing in general. The Bill Gates explanation, I think, is good for it. But who are the customers, and what does it mean to be patient-centric? If your customers are somebody else.
Yeah, so our customers, start with the customers first. First, the customers are healthcare, life sciences, pharma enterprises,
Yeah,
right? And those folks have, multiple challenges in bringing together health data. At the same time, they want to empower their patients, their members, for a better experience. So we're a patient engagement platform for them, right? And so that's how it hits on the patient centricity. So when you deploy Seqster, and we have two versions, we have a white label and we also have an SDK. And we have that both for web as well as iOS and Android on mobile. And so depending on the use cases and how it gets deployed, whether it's with the white label or the SDK, you can deploy this, if you're XYZ pharma company, to 1 million people in your next, cancer trials or rare disease trials. If you're a top payer and you want to cover 50 million lives, you can deploy this tomorrow. It takes 24 hours to set up an instance, and it's HIPAA compliant. We're the only FDA approved patient centric platform, and it's enterprise, but it was built for the patient. we started with the patient, we started with the consumer, and I think that was what was our advantage. And then we kind of worked it backwards in 2018 after we got some great advice on the enterprise.
Makes sense. Now, I want to ask you about you know, as you mentioned, now you've taken on some investors. I noticed Takeda, that's a big name. They're an investor. Why? What was their motivation for investing?
Yeah, look, Takeda had like 300 different ideas within their internal incubation, and they called us up back in 2019 saying that, okay, we want to do business with you, and your vision here is the number one idea that we have out of the 300 that we've outlined. How do
All right.
we how do we set up, some work together? And so that's how it began. And we're so happy to have them both as an investor and as a client as well.
So you've announced a couple of partnerships lately, both with companies that I admire and know pretty well, Medable and Datavant. So what's the background on those? What are you hoping to achieve?
Yeah, so with Medable, that was our most recent announcement just in March. Medable came towards us because they're running, really hard and doing great with decentralized trials, and they needed real-time, real-world data, and our technology fits perfect. And so they're a great growth partner, and we plug in really nicely there. Datavant also knocked on our door because they have the tokenization de-identification piece, and they're selling into the same customers as we are, but their customers are looking for a full comprehensive solution where they can get that real-time real-world data as well as the de-identification of data in one. And so we have Datavant fully integrated. Datavant is another premier partner. We couldn't be more happy that we've created this, base interoperability, patient-centric platform where these premier companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, like Medable and Datavant, have came to little Seqster to have our technology integrated for themselves so that they can sell to their customers as well.
Well, Datavant, Shahir Kassam Adams has been a guest on the podcast as well, so people can go back and hear that. He's a character. He's actually, by the way, one of the two guests this year from Tanzania originally. Little known fact about the podcast.
Very cool. I've always wanted to go to Tanzania.
Yeah, it's I think an interesting place to be. I've never been to that part of Africa, but would be interesting to do. So, what comes next? What can you say about where you go from here?
Yeah, we're just so excited about the enormous use cases. Pharma and life sciences have identified, I don't know, 25 distinct use cases for our platform. And the scale that our platform hits on, there's only one Seqster. There's not another. There's a lot of folks that are, sound a lot alike or doing a lot of work within interoperability, but we are truly differentiated by being a comprehensive, regulated, patient-centric, real-world data platform, and how we're able to bring data together instantly and visualize that data and run various different analytics on that data really sets our platform apart. And I'm just so excited about the fact that our business has been exponentially growing because of the pandemic. I think the pandemic accelerated digital health by 5 to maybe even 10 years.
Yeah, I think
I
so.
used to say 5 to maybe 6 years. I've changed it to maybe 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
It's all about timing, right? We were at the perfect place at the perfect time. We got a great set of investors. We just announced our 12 million Series A. It took a little while to get there, but I'm glad that we took our time because we built a product by patients for enterprise. And that's never happened before.
Great. So, amidst all of the activities that you've been doing, do you have any time for reading and anything that you recommend to listeners?
So I don't have time for reading, but I go on long runs and bike rides to try to decompress whenever we can. and I'll do audiobooks. And my newest edition is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. Highly recommend it. I relate to it in so many different ways because the hardest part of a startup is going from 0 to 1. Once you get to 1, it's just such an incredible feeling, and you forget about how hard 0 was. And this is where everyone starts calling you. And at 0, no one wants to call you. At 1, you have to
Yeah.
decide who you should spend your time with.
Makes sense. Okay, good. Well, we'll listen to that one. And I don't assume Peter narrates it, or is it his own narration, or is it a professional narrator?
No, it's professionally narrated.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
never know. Some people like to narrate their own books. Not usually, though. I've spoken to a couple of authors about it, and they sometimes say, "Did you like that narrator?" Because there was a big fight with the spouse about whether or not this should be the one or somebody else. So, well, that's great. Well, Ardy Arianpour from Seqster, CEO and co-founder, it has been a real pleasure having you on the Health Biz podcast today, and look forward to following your continued success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. A pleasure being on here, and really appreciate your time.
You've been listening to the Health Biz podcast with me, David Williams, president of Health Business Group. I conduct in-depth interviews with leaders in healthcare business and policy. If you like what you hear, go ahead and subscribe on your favorite service. While you're at it, go ahead and subscribe on your second and third favorite services as well. There's more good stuff to come, and you won't want to miss an episode. If your organization is seeking strategy consulting services in healthcare, check out our website, healthbusinessgroup.com.